right, I'm going to begin with a prayer, which is on page 259 of the Book of Common Prayer, if you want to take a note. It's just a stewardship prayer, nothing quite special. But I want to begin it every session. So the Lord be with you. Let us pray. O merciful Creator, your hand is open wide to satisfy the needs of every living creature. Make us always thankful for your loving providence, and grant that we, remembering the account that we must one day give, may be faithful stewards of your good gifts. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, forever and ever. Amen. All right. See, it's slowly. The slow trickle is happening. So we are here to talk about stewardship, but we're doing something a little different than doing the regular annual. It's very bright. As a bit of a pessimist, this is a little too bright for me. But good for us. It's very St. Albans. We're not doing this. We're not going to talk about songs of joy. We are going wider angle. So what we're going to talk about includes things like our annual stewardship. But we are not just talking about stewardship for 2023 at St. Albans. We are spanning out and asking the question, why do we have annual stewardship? And what does God think about how we spend and what we do with our money? And what does it say about what we think about money and about God and the way that we spend and we give? So that's what we mean by a theology of stewardship. The central, my clicker of course is not working, cool. The central passage here, which actually is going to be familiar because, does anyone know what an offertory sentence is? This is going to be like super nerd alert. What is a sentence in our rubric? It's just a line, a thing we say at the beginning of things. So an offertory sentence is something that we say, a line we say during the offering. And this second part of this verse was one of our offertory sentences all the way up until our most recent prayer book. So our 1928 prayer book does have this, and that's why we still use it sometimes. It'll be a familiar phrase to us. But it comes from 1 Chronicles, and it is David speaking/praying in preparation for gathering up the material for the temple that his son Solomon will build, that David really wanted to build and really asked God to build, but God said no. So David says, "But who am I and what is my people that we should be able to offer so willingly after this sort?" And after this sort is all of these things that allow us to come to God and worship. And he says, "For all things come of thee, and of thine own have we given thee." And this little phrase, "all things come of thee, and of thine own have we given thee," is kind of our theological linchpin for everything I want to say over the next four classes, skipping over a week, about stewardship. So for all things come of thee, it's an account of creation. God created all things. Without God, we would have no thing, including ourselves. And of thine own have we given thee, which sounds a little more, but it's just a play of anything that we do give is not ours really to give, but it's already been given to us. It's kind of like if someone brings a really nice bottle of wine to a dinner party, and you're like, I kind of don't want to share this at the dinner party. I kind of want it to go in the back cabinet, but it was brought to share. It really isn't ours to be storing away. Maybe that hits a little too close. I've wanted to do that before. So it's relatable. But if something has been given in the spirit of a gift to be shared, anything that we then give from that, it's the first gift, the gift that precedes any giving from us. So this is kind of our framework, and we're going to keep on coming back here to this verse over this series. We're actually going to start somewhere a bit contemporary for me, because I was talking with Aaron months ago when I posed this idea of teaching this class, because it's not normal to have a Theology of Stewardship Sunday school class during stewardship, and it's especially not normal for a rector to trust a layperson to teach a class on stewardship during stewardship. And so, which is awesome, But we were talking about it, and he mentioned this thing called effective altruism. Has anyone heard of this? Are there any big figures you can think of that hold to effective altruism? Yeah. Yeah, the Patagonia brand has this. Bill Gates is big on this. Our friend Elon Musk, I think, also does a little bit of this. Does anyone want to take a stab at what it is? Good. Yeah, utilitarian charitable giving, right? What is altruism? What's that word? Yeah, giving freely, giving with no expectation of return. Effective means it what? It works. It has effects. It is measurable. So you have both this very kind of soft, generous word tied to this very kind of measurable, rigid word. Tim, did you have something? The most good for the most people, right? Efficiency. We have high efficiency appliances, right? We have efficient uses of water in our washing machines and our dishwashers. That it's the most you can get for the least amount. It's the most efficient use. Good gas mileage, right? Efficiency. We know this word. We like this word. So here's one of the definitions that they have. They say effective altruism is a philosophy and social movement that advocates using evidence and reasoning to determine the most effective ways to benefit others. So there we have the effective altruism. It applies broadly to prioritizing nonprofit work, scientific projects, companies, and policy initiatives, which can be estimated to save the most lives, reduce suffering, help people, or otherwise have the biggest benefit. So this is kind of the framework of how effective altruism works. So it is altruistic in that it wants to do good for those without any return on investment in that way. And they're very much, this whole movement is really focused on future generations. So climate change, those kind of choices and policies are a very big deal because it's about investing in those ahead of us in the most efficient, practical, expedient, beneficial ways. So I wanted to show you just a little bit of an interview from this guy that heads it up, speaking with Trevor Noah, and I forget his name, but it might show up. But nonetheless, he's one of the Peter Singer is a big philosopher associated with this, but he is one of the younger representatives. stop there. So this is a cool idea, right? It feels very counter to what a lot of people want to do with their money, especially those with a lot of resources. I do not want to hate on this, but I do think it is a helpful, maybe foil for us as we talk about stewardship. So effective altruism has 4 key values. You will not be tested on these, I promise. But I want to do this because I want to help. Sometimes in seeing something kind of like what we know, we can more clearly name what it is we're talking about. So effective altruism's values, I think, tell us a lot about effective altruism, but also return us to thinking about stewardship and how it may be similar or different than this kind of big movement that's currently happening that involves a lot of money and a lot of giving in a lot of generous and good ways. So the first value is prioritization. Would someone read, I just snippeted, but would someone read this quote? Can you read it? Yeah. About priors. Why is that word so hard? You guys are just show-offs. Okay. Could someone read the quote for me? Yep. Good. So, as I often say to y'all, what sticks out when you read that about values of prioritizing things? I'm just going to say that because I clearly can't do this word. It's data-driven. So, yeah, where do you see it? Good. Good. So this is scientific, right? There's some I can tell you're a humanities person with the way you shrug that off. It's quantitative, so it's measurable. So it's not just about giving to any cause that seems good, but about weighing the evidence so that those kind of opportunities to give that are the most quantitatively beneficial are where money goes, which means it's not just a free-for-all kind of open hand. It is a directed hand so that you can get the most bang for your buck, essentially, is what you have. It's like the Costco of giving, right? Getting the most bang for your buck. Anna. Good. So the values of prioritizing some things is also telling us about what they value, which is what can be quantitatively shown as beneficial is what is most qualitatively beneficial. So this is a numbers game. That is how we find value, is in what can be measured. All right, we're going to move on, but I highlighted the same thing. This is about not any ways to help, not open-handed ways to help, but about the best ways to help. And again, that seems beneficial, right? When we we're about to vote, right? We're about to vote. And when we vote for initiatives for public schools to get funding for certain things, we don't just say, hey, here's $500,000, do with it what you will. We vote based on what we think is the best way to spend money. This is the kinds of choices we make all the time. This is just in the mode of altruism. Their second value is that it's impartial in how it gives. Would someone like to read this quote? Oh, would someone like to read this quote? Yeah, Jeffrey. Good. So what sticks out here? What does it mean to be impartial? It's lofty. Which part of it feels especially lofty? Good. Good. So it feels, despite being quantitative, what we just learned, really focused on numbers, there's also an idealism about what the ways that we can give, where really it can be about what benefits everyone the most, and not just one person. All people have equal measure and count. Unsurprisingly, probably a lot of this money is going to like African initiatives on getting water, a lot of those places that we think of that have less privilege of access to essential rights. Yeah. Good. Because we all live on this one planet. Yeah. Anything else stick out here? Good. Yeah, it's interesting. It speaks to their values, that it's not just about helping this generation, but they talk about looking out hundreds of years, like 100 years from now, who will be benefiting from our initiatives. We don't want to just be thinking about our lives or our children or our grandchildren, but you're right, it's further and further out on the line in terms of who we care about and who it benefits. So again, lofty, pretty great. We talk about that language sometimes here about investing in St. Albans in the future generations. 100 years from now, who will be standing in this space, worshiping in that one, that kind of thing. Good. Anything else there? I picked up on the same stuff, that everyone's interests equal weight, and they do seem to have some humility here. It's an aim, right? They seem to recognize that this is a lofty goal, but one they want to go towards. And so that is why often you find either these like really visionary entrepreneurs, the ones who do releases, like walking up and down on stages all excited, dorkily, or young people, because this does seem to be this kind of optimistic, kind of charming naivete, maybe at some way as to how they do this. That's a yeah. Yeah, so this guy who gives away half of his money and then is interviewed on Trevor Noah feels a little, and that, Ellen, is one of the big critiques of this movement, that it has a kind of, it has a big presence among the incredibly wealthy and the tech-oriented fields. And so some of people look and they're like, and Trevor Noah actually gets into it later in his interview, like, you're a privileged, wealthy white dude, like, this is cool for you, but why is it that so many of the people buying into this have a certain look to them? It seems to appeal to a certain type of person. So it does seem to attract a certain type. Yeah, Anna Lauren. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yep. Good. Good. No, I think that's good. And from my slight dive, I am no expert in effective altruism, and I'm kind of like Alan, where this kind of just makes me feel a little. These are not my people, but they tend to live in community. They tend to have, like, this guy has like this communal house. That's some of how they have these measures, as they make decisions on spending together, which is again a commendable, that they tend not to be lone ranger types, but do this in communities. So hopefully you're beginning to see, like, there's some similarities to the ways that we give and this kind of contemporary picture of giving. They also value open truth-seeking. I'm just going to read this one because I want to get to the other stuff, but I can see we're tracking now. Rather than starting with a commitment to a certain cause, community, or approach, it's important to consider many different ways to help and seek to find the best ones. Hopefully we're beginning to hear the same things again. This means putting serious time into deliberation, to Anna Lauren's point, and reflection on one's beliefs, being constantly open and curious for new evidence. Us humanities folks are cringing, and arguments, right? That this is being a posture of humility, of discussion, of conversation, and how they find the best ways to give, the most effective ways to give. So, again, this is really, do we have any scientists? We have a math person. Do we have scientists in the room? This is a very, scientific approach. You're open, you have your best guesses, but you're open to the evidence and what will confront you. This is a very kind of scientific mode of thinking. And then the collaborative spirit, which I touched on. It's possible to achieve more by working together, and doing this effectively requires high standards of honesty, friendliness, and a community perspective. Effective altruism is not about ends justify the means reasoning. Rather, it is about being a good citizen while ambitiously working toward a better world. So this communal, this is not Lone Ranger, again, focus. I find this a really interesting phrase. I don't totally know what that means. I'm guessing it might be kind of Aristotelian about what it means to be a good citizen, is what you owe the other person, being a good neighbor, having civic responsibility. I don't think it means necessarily being a good citizen of any one country. I think it's more philosophical than that. So that's effective altruism. And we have this other picture, and actually this is so cool. If any of you didn't, I think it's so nerd cool. Does anyone know who this is? Yeah, so this is David Sibley, who was an Episcopal priest who last week, I believe, 2 weeks ago, was on Jeopardy. He was a 4-day winner. His winnings came to $78,098. And he was kind of funny because he knew that suddenly people noticed who he was. And on his last day, I think he wore a collar. He didn't wear a collar every time. But he kind of used this as he knew people would be looking up his Twitter. And so he has these fun little, he's friends with Andrew, actually, which is, because Andrew's Twitter cool. Not to say he isn't also cool, but he's definitely Twitter cool. So David, ooh, wow. What was that? That's just me talking loud. That's just me. Whoops, I got excited. David put out these tweets the other week, and I sent it to myself so I wouldn't forget. And I think it's perfect because it's a different picture than effective altruism, but also a very modern, contemporary example done on Twitter of giving with this nearly $80,000 win. He writes, Episcopalians, let's talk about giving. Since I seem to have your attention, gotta love not having the edit button, my family will give a tithe of total winnings before taxes, 10% to my parish. Why? Quite simply, I'm doing well on Jeopardy because of the gifts given to me to remember lots of stuff and recall it quickly. It's part of who I am and who God made me to be. So the proceeds of that, none of it is really mine to begin with. It's all God's. So giving a tenth of it back to God's work through St. Paul's Walla Walla, which is his church. It's an act of trust in what God has done, what God will do, and a way for me to grow spiritually through that trust. I'm really excited to see how the parish will use the tithe. I'm letting my vestry to decide how to dispose of it and abstaining from the discussion otherwise. And I'm glad to do it. Thanks for coming to my stewardship talk. All right, so one, this is I'm preparing for a theology on stewardship class when we get this. But also, as I was thinking about effective altruism, I realized this is a really helpful comparison. So I want us to take, we don't have a lot of time, I want us to take a couple minutes at your table-ish tables to talk about what you think the difference is, if there's any, which I'm guessing you can guess that I think there are some, between these two types of giving. They're both open-handed gifts, but what do you think, if you had to name it, is the difference between effective altruism and the example of Christian tithing that we find in David Sibley's tweets? I'm going to give you a minute before I ask you. You can talk with one another. You can think on it. You can jot down notes. But I know for some people they need a second, so I want to give you a second to think on that. So, distinctions. What is different? What do you think if you had to crystallize it? Anna. Good. Good. So one big, and this is, I actually got this question when I was opening up questions. Someone asked, why can't we give when we pledge to certain things? I know all of you just want to give to adult formation, right? You just want to give all of your money. We're going to have disco balls in here. And the answer to that question, we do have special funds. You can give to sacred arts, right? Finishing the work is a good one. There are things you can give to, but the tithe is exactly this. It is about giving without stipulation, which seems to be here. And control isn't always a bad thing. As an example, I had a horrible experience with Spectrum years ago. I hate Spectrum. They're the nemesis. And so when we moved back to Waco, I'm we're going Grande. I don't care how bad Grande is, I am not giving. And that is a good kind of, I don't want my money going towards certain things. I won't buy Nestle products if it's up to me, because that's a corporation that I have some serious issues with. Control isn't necessarily bad, but in terms of alms and giving, there does seem, I think you're right, to be a big distinction between those two. What else? Good, say more. Good. So all things come of thee, O Lord, and of thine own have we given thee. We're just a secondary actor in that picture. Whereas this is the reasoned, careful, deliberate giver. I think that's right. And this is why I am guessing that as we talk about things like stewardship, we might get a little uncomfortable, because this is a mode that we're used to. This is not countercultural, right, when in terms of money, for the agent to be the giver. Whereas this is very contrary to the ways that we give. That's good, Jeffrey. Thank you. Yeah, Anna Lauren. That makes a ton of sense, actually. So as a very simple example, there are things when you work at a church that you know needs money to be covered, that are unglamorous, that seem unimportant. When you're in there day in and day out, having now been on that side, there are things that parishioners may never think to give to. They're not sexy, they're not fancy, they're small little things that often you don't know as the giver what you are giving to in general fund. I mean, you can ask and look, but you don't know about, and that's a very practical example of the even broader, we don't know all of the needs of this parish or of this community, and we don't need to know in the act of tithing. Whereas to not know and give without that knowledge, in this kind of picture of effective altruism, would be being a bad steward, right, of your resources, because it's not the best ways to give money. Good. It makes a ton of sense. As per usual, Ellen, our little sage. Here it's about, back to agency, it's about I give effective altruism to help others. Whereas there's a very baseline that we're going to keep on coming back to, that the picture of tithing and more broadly of being stewards is that we give our time, our resources, our gifts, which in turn it benefits us. We become better in the process. We become better oriented. And so it's kind of a selfish kind of gift, but it's a selfish kind of gift in freely giving. I think if we said we don't do things to benefit ourselves, we'd be lying, but it's a different kind of mode of benefiting. Eric and then Megan. Yeah. Good. 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 Yeah. That there is a trust that God will work in God's church in a way that even if we don't love a certain choice of, I'm sure when we got the renovations, I know some people didn't love every choice, but the motivation for giving wasn't out of this place of I know how to do it best. And this is, I think, part of why it's hard for us with my spectrum attitude. It's hard for us to trust the church. We have a vestry or two member in here. We trust the vestry to make those decisions. Not just Aaron. We trust the vestry. I have no say in it. But it is. It's a different kind of way around money. Megan, you're probably going to be our final word for time. So this is kind of attitudes like, I'm good. Let me help others. Well, and that's why it tends to fit a certain demographic of people. It's people of means and power. All right, we really have to answer you, but yes, Tim. Well, and yeah. 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 Yeah, there's tons of, yep. Yep. So we do, but to defend my point, the way this all got started is at least the most eager beavers of effective altruism use the language of a secular tithe. And so because they use the language of a secular tithe, I'm not pitting it against, but I'm making very clear effective altruism is not a theology of stewardship, of Christian stewardship. It doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, of course we think this money going towards goods. It's just not what we are doing here. And the reason I'm doing this is not, and I tried to set that up, but I might not have done it perfectly. I'm not trying to pit them against each other, but I do think it is helpful for us. This is much more in line with how we just think about money. It's how I think about spectrum, my crabbiness. What we're being asked here is different for very different reasons than even the best examples of almsgiving outside of kind of this theology of giving. And so this is not meant to pit, but it is making very clear this is not this. And I think many of us kind of slip into this, like wanting to be specific about what money of our tithe goes to what areas, that kind of maybe get at the heart of why this makes us a little uneasy, along with other things. I need to end there because children need to get picked up. I do want to say, for the rest of the series, it won't be like this, but I wanted to kind of set this up. We're going to look at the biblical witness, especially Old Testament. We're going to talk about debt, because I know a number of us in this room have debt, and that's a real thing, and about money more generally and giving, and why money gets to the heart of these things. We're also going to keep on coming back to this idea that what we give in this act of stewardship season is an affirmation of what's already been given. So it's also going to be a reorientation of these resources to begin with. If you have questions or more pushback, you can grab me, or you can email me, or you can stick something in the box if you want to be anonymous. Let me pray. Lord, thank you for giving good gifts, and thank you for this annual reminder that they are gifts that have been given to us so that we can freely give them away. Help us not to be anxious, enslaved, or mastering over things that are not ours.